All right, welcome everyone to tonight's training on our recession guide called Thriving in Turbulent Times. It's one that we were actually talking last week. Warren and I were talking to someone about it last week about all the opportunities that can come through recession. It kind of happened really spontaneously that we just decided, you know what, may as well go for it and share what we know on this topic for everyone else out there interested. And it seems like there's been quite a bit of interest in this topic because you hear a lot of people talking about recessions or doom and gloom, but what a lot of people don't talk about is the other side to recessions, which is all about the opportunity, as long as you put your focus there. So, yeah, welcome, guys. Great to have you all on here. While Warren and I kick it off, if you guys just want to type in the chat where you're tuning in from, I always like to get an idea of the audience and where you guys are listening in from. So my guess is different parts of Australia, but always good to see. So as usual, I'm from Perth. Wish I could be traveling like Stephen, but here we are in good old Perth, Western Australia. So let me just fix up my webcam in the meantime. I realized it was actually taken off my webcam before this session, so I was like a minute late because I had to fix it up. But while people are typing in the chat, how are you, Warren? Oh, you're muted.
I'm well. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. All right, so we've got different people from different parts of Australia: Brisbane, Quarterbuck, Sydney, Bunbury, Tasmania, Rockhampton, Shepparton, Tasmania. So quite a few country people, quite a few rural people. Stephen will be happy with that. Tasmania, yeah, I saw Tasmania got its a new AFL team. So I guess you can consider that a win for Tasmania, but maybe not for the Australians with how much money is being put towards it with taxpayers' money. New Zealand, Queensland, Brisbane. So yeah, thanks for putting that in, guys. Great to have all of you on here and get all the engagement. But may as well get started. So from my end, before I get you to share your perspective on this, Warren, I'll just quickly give a few heads up for people listening. So today, what the purpose of today's training is, just so you guys are all aware, is it's really to give you an overview to a lot of this stuff we were talking about with opportunities in recession. What I am looking to do, though, is depending on the interest and depending how you guys find this, is that I'm looking to actually do a series on this to go through different aspects of a recession. So if this one goes well, this is more to just kind of prepare the groundwork, the foundations, and kind of all the stuff you want to have in place to actually thrive in a recession. The other weeks, if there's interest, like I said, we can dive further into depth into different topics like different industries that we believe will survive, for example, around investing in business. That was one I had in mind, and a couple others. But like I said, today is more just to give an overview, some good tips as well of thriving in a recession, and then from there we can go from there and dive into depth more into other topics. But yeah, I'll hand over to you, Warren, to share your part before we kick things off.
Sure. So yes, we decided to do this one about thriving in a recession and really teaching, because there's no question right now that the Reserve Bank, the American Federal Reserve are all talking about it. People can now see it. People are seeing the change in cost of living increasing quite exponentially, and just interest rates going up, the housing shortage, everything like that. And often that can create a lot of fear. But generally in the midst of recession, there's always opportunity. So for those who are prepared and who've educated themselves and who are ready to go, then you're very much, it means that you're in a much better position depending on where you're at in terms of your own money and things like that. And of course, throughout this training today, we'll be sharing about later on the different tiers where people are at, because obviously if you're quite new, it's more about stabilizing your life, your income. For other people who are more prepared, it's about actually getting yourself ready for, next level and possibly great opportunities. And so the idea is that in times of recession, this is where many of the greatest millionaires and many of the greatest wealthy have been made in history. So with that, I've asked Edward to share today. Of course, Edward's been, learning all this kind of stuff since he was young, knows his stuff very, very well by now. And I've asked him to share just to introduce you and get things started. So Ed, over to you. In fact, before I do, just a disclaimer, obviously, we don't provide any kind of financial advice. It's very, very general in nature, what we're teaching today. And like, if you want to get any kind of specific financial advice or even general financial advice on what to do, you need to really go to see someone licensed. So this is very much education based. Okay, so over to you, Ed.
Yeah. So thanks for the introduction. Yeah, most of everything that we're teaching and sharing on today, there was going to be a disclaimer anyway, but it's always good to go over and above with it because you guys would understand the regulations behind a topic like this and all. So today, really, although I'm sharing on and speaking on this topic, it's not really what I've put together myself. I've put a lot of this content together just by working with Warren, was kind of leveraging off his research and a lot of the stuff that we've learned throughout the years that other people have shared on different economists are speaking about. So really everything that you're going to learn today is not just from my own perspective, it's from Warren's and from a lot of other people who you can consider quite savvy in this area. And really my role is just to kind of share with you guys and bring it all together. So basically what we're going to be doing is my guess is this will run for about an hour or so, 45 minutes or an hour. So if anyone does have things you need to attend to, like later in the night, and it's not finished by then, there will be a replay available as there is with any of our other free trainings. It'll be uploaded to either our membership site or YouTube or both. And one way or the other, we'll send you guys an email with the replay. So if you do happen to miss it because you have any other commitments, then yeah, there will be a replay available and it'll be sent to you by email, or if you're subscribed to YouTube, it'll be sent there as well. But with that in mind, we'll now kick things off. And like we mentioned in the email as well, for those of you that actually want to have understand more of how to go from here, there also will be an offer that we'll be walking you through. But regardless, if you're looking to get started with that, there's going to be a lot of value in this training, and that's why we've decided to put it on is to benefit you. So what we've called it is Recession Guide, How to Thrive in Turbulent Times. The reason that we actually decided to put this training on between myself, Warren, and a couple of other people that we were speaking to last week who are outside of Global Wealth Club is because what we realized and what a lot of people talk about, I'm sure you guys have seen it if you're subscribed or listen to different podcasts or different type of people around the wealth industry. And a lot of people talk about recessions coming up, economic collapses, and just different topics around the area, just anything to do with the economy, Great Reset and recession. Most people decide to focus on the angle of doom and gloom, as I said before. I think all of us are over that by now, as we can all agree. Especially in the last decade or so, there's been a lot of scare tactics, a lot of marketing, and a lot of fear-based promotions, especially about the recession, to try to scare people and get them to take certain action that they probably don't even need to take in the first place. So really why we've decided to put this on is to bring a balanced perspective to the whole thing, because that's what we're all about in Global Wealth Club, is that, yes, there obviously is struggle ahead if you're not prepared, but at the same time, the more balanced view of it is that if you are prepared, then there's a lot of opportunities that can actually make you more successful in this time if you know where to look and if you know how to prepare. But like I said, that's not a massive like promotion or anything. It's just a balanced perspective, is that if you know what to do, you will succeed. But if you don't know, then you'll struggle. And it's just a matter of finding that middle ground and knowing how to actually look at it. So you can kind of look from both angles and find the middle of where you need to be. But yeah, Recession Guide, How to Thrive in Turbulent Times. Once again, this is more going to be an overview session. So a lot of this is more going to be an overview to actually give you a good foundation to understand about recessions and a bit of history behind it and why we're heading for one, and as well as some good tips and strategies that you can follow. The plan is that if this goes well and if enough people are interested in, I want to actually run a few more weeks on this or a series on it to actually dive into more depth into certain topics like industries that we think will survive, especially if you're looking to invest into things or if you're looking to position your career in a way that will withstand the recession. But as usual, if it does get to that point and we run a session on that, then that'll just be our own opinions on things and not any advice. And Warren mentioned it before, but as you guys would be familiar with, any training that we run is not advice, not financial advice at all. It's just purely education and empowerment. Everything today, as you'll realize, is more going to be focused on general principles and strategies. It's not going to be any advice for your specific situation. If that is what you're looking for, you're best off to see a licensed professional in the area, whether it's a financial planner, accountant, or tax planner, or anything along those lines. Also, if you do have any questions pop up as we go along, it'd be easier if you just put them in the Q&A box, because what can happen is if it goes into the chat, it can be missed, or I'll kind of have to scroll through different things to find it. Whereas in the Q&A box, it's just a lot easier to navigate, and especially if we get a few questions come up. So the comment section is more just for general remarks or anything like that. But what we'll do to start off this training is start out by calling the big problem, which we're well aware of by now, or if you're at least tuning into this, you'll have an inkling of it, you would. The world is fast heading for a brutal recession. And I don't just say that because, like I said, not to promote scarcity. What we'll be doing in this session is we'll actually be showing you factual information, statistics, and different reasons why we're actually heading for it. Not just kind of just telling you we're heading for a recession and then giving you tips or anything. We'll actually be showing you and walking you through different signs and different facts and statistics that are proving this, as well as different people who are saying it to back that theory. And what I actually wanted to ask before we begin this training was, are you ready for it? My guess is, ultimately, no one can truly be ready for, fully ready for a recession, because sometimes things can go completely opposite to what we think. But are you at least positioned in a place where you're kind of a little bit ready for it? Whether that means, and when I say ready for it, what I mean by that is your career ready for a recession? Is your investments ready for a recession? And are you actually in an overall lifestyle position that can withstand a recession? Feel free to put in the chat your opinion. You don't have to, but if you're happy to share with everyone else and also just with me, if you feel like you're in a good position overall for if we were to go into a recession, just type a Y in the chat or type an N depending on where you're at. Like, if you're happy to do that, it'd just be good to get an idea of the type of people that are listening in. So yeah, Cindy are working on it. That's good. Even if you're not in the position, all that matters is that you're working on it. And every step, as Stephen Pettit talks about, for those of you that listen to the economy update, as long as there's one step every day you're taking towards sovereignty and preparing for this, then that's all that really matters. And eventually you'll get there if you focus on one step at a time. And also, as well as being prepared for it, the other question too, which I had here, was that are you also set up to capitalize on the incredible opportunities which exist in recessions? And just so you guys know what we mean by incredible opportunities in recession, so you actually know a more tangible aspect to what we mean when we talk about opportunities in a recession, is that opportunities can come in a lot of different forms, just depending on what you actually want to get successful in. Opportunities can mean investment opportunities. There actually are a lot of investments out there that a lot of people are capitalizing on, whether you're invest into businesses like private businesses, which is what various people we know in our network do, whether you more invest into stocks like online stocks or the stock market, whether you invest into cryptos. There's just different investment opportunities that are out there. And that's what we mean by incredible opportunities, is that when times of crisis come, and I'll be sharing a little bit more on this down the track in this session, but when we talk about opportunities, it's really opportunities that actually come up that you won't generally find when the economy is booming, or when the economy is just in a middle ground type of like a prosperous time. When the economy is actually in a massive downturn or inflation or anything like that, then opportunities can come, which a lot of people don't see. So investments which don't actually prosper in other times start prospering in times of recession, because people start moving there. The classic example of a good opportunity, like in the Great Depression, was the entertainment industry. If you invested in the entertainment industry when the Great Depression was happening, you would have succeeded a lot, because entertainment suddenly boomed, whereas in normal times, entertainment, as we all know, is just like, it's nothing special. But in times of crisis, entertainment was a huge opportunity, because that industry just massively grew in a time of crisis, because a lot of people wanted to numb their pain. So with alcohol, funnily enough, and even the sex industry, which was really funny, those types of industries suddenly became incredible opportunities, because they just boomed all of a sudden, when normally they just kind of flatlined or anything like that. So that's really what we mean by opportunities. There's also other stuff, as well as investing, also things like community. That's definitely another opportunity as well, is that you meet a lot more people who are like-minded, which we even saw through COVID. So that's what I mean when I talk about questioning that, whether you're actually ready or positioned in the place where you can capitalize on good opportunities. If you answered no to these questions, and My guess is most people here, especially if you're attending a training like this, you probably are working on it, which is really good, because any way that you can to get educated on it is really what will make you 2 steps ahead of everyone else, especially the masses who just kind of sit there ignorant to everything going on. People like who attend trainings like this or listen to different podcasts are people who are more likely to actually be able to take advantage and see opportunities before everyone else does. And yeah, I'm liking the comments that are coming through as well. It's really good to see. So yeah, this training will be good for you. If you did answer no, or if you're working on this, training will be really good for you. And as you saw in the landing page or the emails that we sent out, basically really what we're sharing on today in summary is history of recessions, why they happen and how to prepare. The purpose we wanted to do this was an overview session, as well as to actually educate you on to really understand what a recession is and what a recession means to finances and everything else, and why they happen and how to actually prepare for it. It's really important that if you are preparing for a recession, or if you're planning to take advantage of different opportunities out there, that you actually understand why you need to do it, and that you actually understand what a recession is in the first place, as we can all agree. So that's the first point, how to not only survive, because it's one thing to be able to survive a recession and just be able to get by it, but it's another thing to actually come out of it even better than what you were beforehand. And a lot of people, that actually is a real possibility. Like the Great Depression, for example, as we said, more millionaires were made, so more people came out better than they've ever lived before, because they knew where to look and they knew what to do when the economy collapsed. So the other thing too, signs of why we're heading for a recession, and 7 simple strategies you can follow to become sovereign and thrive in the upcoming recession. So sovereignty really is about becoming independent, whether that means financially and in all areas of your life, and also thrive in the upcoming recession. Because ultimately, if you're looking to take advantage of different opportunities and be well prepared, then sovereignty is a very key aspect of that. And now that that's all said, let's get things underway. We're now in the age of AI, or in other words, artificial intelligence. Most of you guys would be aware of that now. Everyday life, we can see that. There's plenty of signs that actually show we're in the artificial intelligence age, I should say. In times past, we've recently gone through the information age, which was when the world moved a lot more to online and digital, and when the world moved a lot more to accessible information online, rather than just being in libraries and enclosed areas. Now the information out there is way more accessible than ever before. That's the time we were recently in, was the information age. Before that, we were in the industrial age, which was when the world moved more towards machinery and less manual work. And it started introducing the concept of automated working and employment and things like that. Then it moved into the information age, and now we're in the probably middle or early stages of the artificial intelligence age. There's still a long way to go, but it's a very important thing to understand, because when we talk about opportunities, you need to understand what age we currently are in. Once you understand that, you'll actually be able to understand where to look and what type of opportunities there are out there that you can get into early on before everyone else catches on. So even understanding that we're in the age of artificial intelligence, you can just work out that if we are in that age and it's going to develop more, well, there clearly has to be opportunities in technology or in automation or something like that. And if you can find them and also position your career in a way that is going with that and is going with the artificial intelligence age, you'll already be well ahead of everyone else. So the reason I say that is because when, let's say the Industrial Revolution happened, and like, again, most people would latch onto it, whereas the people that would have seen the Industrial Revolution happening earlier on and would have positioned their careers in a much different way, then they wouldn't have lost jobs. There would have been a lot less suffering, and there would have been a lot more prosperity if people put their money more towards machinery and into automation. That's just a basic example to think of it. And hopefully that's making sense what I'm saying. So really it's just about understanding where we're at and positioning yourself early on, your investments, your career and business and everything else to actually be able to do it. Some key signs that the world is actually in the artificial intelligence age is different factors like automation is growing. what I mean by automation is if you're a business owner or even possibly an employee, you'd understand what I mean by this. So automation is basically where less people are involved in producing a task or a result. A good example of this is like even scheduling emails that can be done automatically, because all you need, I mean, it still requires manual work, but you can actually automate things to make it happen streamlessly. And kind of like robots or AI systems like ChatGPT, for example, is automatically producing copywriting. A lot of copywriters are finding that they're freeing up a lot of their time because using automation softwares like ChatGPT is around. Things like Infusionsoft or contact record management, but our databases for business owners, you can do a lot of automation through that. Even the self-checkout machines in Woolies or Coles or IGA, actually not really IGA, more Woolies, I think it is. Even Big W, Kmart, and those type of places, that is also automation, because now that you no longer need a staff member, like if you're in the Woolworths business owner or management position, you no longer need staff members, because now customers are automatically being able to pay for their groceries and you're no longer having to pay for someone's role. That's what I mean by automation. That's rapidly growing. It's happening in a lot of different industries. It's happening in a lot of different areas. And the reason too I'm sharing this is because if you understand that automation is growing, well, maybe you can start looking for ways that you can automate in your business to save money. And that's definitely what we're doing ourselves in Global Wealth Club, is we're always looking for ways to actually automate things and cut back on costs. And that's one way of capitalizing on different opportunities out there. And there's a lot more softwares too out there which can actually help you do automation. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. Robots too are quickly replacing people's jobs. I actually went to a restaurant probably last month or 2 months ago. I've heard a lot about robots and self-serving and things like that, and I've never actually really thought much into it because I'm used to, as everyone else probably is, I'm used to just sitting on a table and having a waitress or a waiter bring my food to me, especially in a normal restaurant where you order food, drinks and whatnot. And suddenly when I ordered my food through a QR code, so QR code once again replacing people's job because automated ordering, and excuse me, my throat's getting a bit dry. So suddenly, like when I was looking across the table, I just see a robot. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but it was like on wheels and brought my food to me. And I took the food from the plate off this robot, clicked finished, and see the robot go back to the kitchen. And I found it really fascinating that even nowadays, in the early stages of artificial intelligence developments, that we're now seeing robots even serving food in cafes or in restaurants. That was a big eye-opener for me. And the sooner you realize that's actually where the world is heading, and rather than resist and rather than complain or fight about it, but actually grow with it and seeing ways that you can take advantage of it, the better off you'll be. Most people, I find, like even my nana, for example, doesn't really like where the world is heading with robots. Obviously, it was a much different time before online took off. And a lot of people don't like the fact that robots are going to be working and you're no longer, they can't really grasp the idea that there's going to be not much human interaction in different ordering. And instead, you're going to be dealing with robots. Most people just complain about it and don't do anything about it. Whereas a lot of wealthy people who are good investors, who are good business owners and all that, rather than complain about it, they look at it objectively. They see a solution. That is where the world's heading. They see evidence behind it because more people are using it, even online shopping, for example. And they find a way to get involved in the space rather than just being a consumer. They actually get involved to do it. I remember Andrew Tate said that too, is that rather than just being a consumer of the changes, you actually want to be a pioneer or an innovator of it and actually start getting into it early. Many industries too are putting people out of business, being put out of business. Classic example of this and where the world's heading is, and yeah, I saw some comments at Target in particular, and won't support robots. So yeah, there's a lot of different views on it and all that. But many industries are being put out of business. We recently saw not Netflix. A lot of video libraries, for example, is the first one that comes to my mind, just because obviously with the world moving more online with Netflix, Foxtel, and everything like that, most people don't even use DVDs anymore. And it's just a lot of places are being put out of business. So especially if you're a business owner or if you're an investor into certain businesses, you want to take a careful look at which industries are being put out of business and make sure that you're not involved in them, especially if a recession's coming up. And things like artificial intelligence, if they're taking over, just try to look at businesses which aren't going to be able to use AI technology. And the businesses that don't use AI technology are more likely going to go bust than ones that are able to introduce it and bring it in. So, like I said, I don't really have much time to go into this as much today, which is why if there's enough interest, we actually would run a training or series on which industries we believe would be good for the times to come and which ones probably won't. But that's if there's enough interest, like I said, which I'll just ask at the end. But you can't ignore the signs and ignore the changes. Like what I said before, think of the Industrial Revolution. There would have been signs that slowly people were losing jobs, but people would have neglected that. They would have ignored the changes. They wouldn't have paid attention to it. But those who did, and those who actually saw that the world was moving more towards machinery and automation and left their career or upskilled themselves, would have been a lot better off and wouldn't have all the financial pressure put on them like everyone else who lost jobs because they realized once it was too late. A good example of this is with artificial intelligence taking over. Let's say you currently work as a simple job like a waitress or a waiter or something like that in a restaurant. Just using the example I used before, where I actually walked into a place, I didn't even realize I had robots serving, but like somewhere like that, a lot of places in 10 or 20 years from now probably will be thinking the same because number one, it cuts costs. Like if you think of it as a business owner, number one, using robots will cut you costs. So it cuts staff fees. Number two, it saves you the hassle of dealing with human emotion because, as you know, employees could be having a bad day or they could be having a lot of pressure in their personal life and bringing that to work. So you no longer have to deal with the human emotion aspect of it. Number three, robots probably would be more efficient because sometimes humans are prone to mistakes, as we know, whereas robots, if you program them right, all you really need to make sure is that their program and wiring is fixed up and up to date, and they're less likely to make mistakes. So from a business owner's perspective, you're probably going to move more towards robots. So if you currently work as a waiter or a waitress, and like I said, this is just an example, then you've got to question whether 10 or 20 years from now, whether your job will still be safe. If it's not safe, then one way you could take advantage of this opportunity is that look for a career that will be safe when a recession comes and when the AI really takes over, and then start building towards that because you'll already be well ahead of everyone else who's not even preparing and will suddenly get the shock of their life when they realize that wherever the world's moving towards that, they're going to be replaced by or they're going to not be able to take part of it. Many people will lose jobs and income and lifestyle, and that's just no secret. The reason I say that is because, as we know, looking off history, we've seen that in times past. We saw it in the Great Depression. GFC was to a small degree. Even COVID was a good example of this, that when there was a economic uncertainty that a lot of people were losing jobs, income and lifestyle. And now as the world moves more towards the age of AI and the recession, it will just keep growing and the trend will keep going. At the same time, though, others will find great opportunities than ever before and greatly prosper. And I've shared a lot on that now, and I really want to re-emphasize and keep reiterating that to you guys because, as we know, repetition is the key to actually get something really sunken into your brain, especially if you're planning to go further into this topic and learn more and position yourself. It's really important to actually sink it in because it takes a lot of times listening to something before it really integrates into your body and into your brain. I've certainly found that myself is that you can hear something and you can understand it theoretically, But once it actually integrates and sinks into your body and you get that click in your mind, don't know how to explain it, then you actually like start moving a lot faster. So that's why I want to keep reiterating this, is because it's one thing to listen to it theoretically and say you understand it, but then actually feeling it is a whole other thing. Now, the difference between these two, like people who will lose jobs and people who will find opportunity, there's one key difference, or probably multiple, but one key difference that will actually separate these two and what you want to understand. People who capitalize on the opportunities are going to adapt to times rather than resist. And I know that adapting is easier said than done. A lot of people struggle with adapting to change just because, especially if you're used to doing something your whole life. If you've done something the same way your whole life and suddenly it has to change, adapting can be a whole lot harder. But it's one thing to complain about it and one thing to resist it, but one way or the other, if you want to actually take part of these opportunities and be able to capitalize on them, then you've got to find a way to be able to adapt. And that's why it's important to be educated, which is why it's really good that you guys are listening to something like this and reading different books or listening to different podcasts and whatever else, because one way or the other, you've got to find a way to adapt rather than resist. And most people are so resistant to these changes. Like I've had a lot of people say that they don't believe in robots. They really can't get their head around the idea that that they don't want to be involved with robots because it's going to. And by the way, I'm just using robots as an example just because it's a common topic and somewhere where the world is definitely heading. There's probably a lot of other things, but just for the sake of simplicity, I want to keep it to one example. But robots, most people resist it. They say they're not going to support it. They don't want to have anything to do with robots. But that exact mentality is what's going to get you into trouble, and that what's going to put you back and possibly affect things and affect your career. Because if you're not willing to understand the changes and where the world is moving towards, and you're so stuck on the idea that you're not going to have any part of it, then that's ultimately the mindset that will get people into trouble. And we would have seen that in the Industrial Revolution. Most people would have believed that they just couldn't get their head around the idea that machines would do the work just as well as humans, or that the machines would possibly even do it better. And they just couldn't get their head around it. Even, I'm sure those of you that have been following us for a while, even Warren self-proclaims that he never understood the idea of moving towards online shopping, and he was always resistant of it. He said there's no way the world's going to move to online shopping because you've got to actually see, feel, and try on the clothes, and you've got to actually see it in person, feel it on, make sure it's the right size and all that. And now these days, he pretty much just shops online, and that's where the world's moved towards. Same thing with watching movies online and watching Netflix and all that. People would have believed that there'd always be video libraries around. But one thing we realize is that most things, or pretty much anything, doesn't last forever. And that's why it's just important that rather than resisting it, make sure you can see things early on. And when you do see something earlier on, then adapt to it, because that's what's going to separate people who struggle and people who prosper. And yeah, pretty much what I was just saying, like the Industrial Revolution, people who can't adapt will struggle, and those who can will prosper. So to understand the impact of something like that, if you don't adapt, let's just take a look at some statistics behind the Industrial Revolution to people who couldn't adapt. These are just some facts, not to scare you, but just to understand what happens to people who stay stuck in the same mentality and aren't willing to change at all, and aren't willing to change their career, find ways to generate more income, or invest into different places than what they've been doing their whole life. Suicide rates increased by around 30%. As we know, most people chose to commit suicide when things got financially hard, when their families were struggling, when they were struggling. The Industrial Revolution saw suicide rates increase by 30%. People who couldn't adapt, who lost jobs and couldn't find any employment, and suddenly got a lot of mental stress put on them, they decided to commit suicide, and we saw that. I don't know the exact statistic in COVID, but I'm sure suicides would have increased by a little bit. And I'm pretty sure I actually did see a report somewhere during the time of COVID that suicide did increase. I just can't remember the exact number. But in the Industrial Revolution as well, unemployment fluctuated between 10 to 22.8%. which as we know is a massive figure because today's world, from my understanding, is around, in Australia, is around 3 to 4% unemployment. So you can just imagine right now, we're currently at like 3 to 4% unemployment, whereas in the Industrial Revolution, it was more around 10 to 22.8% unemployment. And that would be a massive impact on the economy, just because people couldn't have jobs, they couldn't feed their family and everything else, which led from one thing to another. And obviously, it was a time where a lot of people struggled mentally, emotionally, physically, and financially just because they couldn't adapt and they were caught out heavily. And there were a lot of different ways they were suffering. And that is what we saw. We recently got a taste of it with COVID. So, and what I mean by that with COVID is that we actually did get a taste of it, obviously not to the same extent that the Industrial Revolution would have presented, and probably not the same extent that this recession will present as well. But we got a little bit of a taste of it in terms of how we struggle and how humans adapt and how humans actually deal with pressure and deal with it. And hopefully, from COVID, you actually learned a lesson or two. That imagine if we were actually prepared for COVID. I don't think anyone saw it coming, but like if you did see it coming, then that would have been really good. But imagine if you're actually well prepared for COVID and 2 years in advance or so, you knew there would be opportunities. Like, because, for example, cryptos, I'm pretty sure would have boomed during COVID. I know different people who in our networks who made the biggest profits of their lifetime from trading the stock market during COVID. And imagine if you saw that coming like 1 or 2 years in advance and you were able to get ready for it, start building up investment capital, and then you were able to invest into opportunities and make a lot of profits, then how much better would life have been than rather than having to deal with it when the problem already came? And that's why it's a lot of people say, yeah, like when I mention that to them, when they hear it, they say, yeah, I wish I was prepared for it because I would have done so much better. Well, the thing is, there's going to be more versions of COVID out there. And I'm sure we can all agree is that COVID was not the final thing that's going to happen to this economy and to our country. There's going to be plenty more things that governments will induce, whether it's natural or whether it's more government induced. There'll be plenty more issues come to the economy. And a lot of people will struggle. If people just wait for the problems to happen, then obviously, like COVID, they'll struggle a lot. Who knows if it'll get to that same level? But as long as you're prepared and you can see something coming, like this recession, when they already talked about by 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy. So it's literally right there and writing for you from the World Economic Forum. If you're prepared for it, then the benefit of hindsight is always a beautiful thing. And yeah, that's why being prepared for and actually taking action towards it is a great thing. And it feels like things are paused, or it feels like things are over, but the reality is it's far from over. Like, I'm sure we got a taste of COVID and that happened for like 2 years or something. It feels like a lifetime ago now, but it feels like things have settled, no doubt. But the reality is it's far from over. In fact, it's just the beginning. There's no question about it. We can all sense the calm before the storm. So just out of curiosity, well, just so that I can get a perspective from you guys, what are your guys' thoughts after COVID? Do you feel like it's far from over? Do you feel like that was the end, or is there more to come? It would be good. Just because from my perspective and Warren's perspective and everyone else, and a few others we've spoken to, we all unanimously agree that there's a calm before the storm, because COVID was like a huge how do I put this? Like a huge shock to people. Now we're kind of in a settled phase, or we're in a calm before the storm, but there's going to be another storm that comes. And the period we're currently in with our economy and with everything else is more just that calm. Hopefully that makes sense what I'm saying. Yeah, more to come. Just getting started. The digital prison is going to be horrific and very deadly. More to come. So yeah, I'm glad we're all on the same page. That's what it feels like. It just... Yeah, Leonie, I think that's how to pronounce your name. I couldn't agree more. That was just the rehearsal. It was just like a test phase. And no doubt if you were the governments or if you were pharmaceutical companies and all that, you probably would be laughing and like very happy with how it went out, because people did not cope well with it. And you can pretty much see that people are not going to cope with everything else happening. That's exactly how we feel it's going to happen, is that right now we're just in a very calm period, but there's plenty more to come. Why is that? So the reason too, because it's one thing to actually say it's the calm before the storm, but like I said, the purpose of today's training was to actually present factual information. So rather than just like giving these horrible ideas or giving these different theories and whatever else and fear tactics or whatever you want to call it, like there's actually stats behind, and it's actually really good for you to understand the statistics behind it, because I find for myself, at least, when I'm told something, I can understand it myself, and I obviously feel the emotions and can prepare if I need to, but I always find that it's really sinks in when I understand facts behind it and stats. So real factual information, not just theories. And when you understand economic cycles, it's not hard to see where the world is heading, and it's heading for a recession. Because as well as people actually claiming it, so people like Robert Kiyosaki, Bill Bonner, and different wealth experts in the industries, as well as, and even Porter Stainsbury too, plenty of people run and share these theories, but it's not just them sharing it. Donald Trump was another one too that came to mind, but it's also just understanding economic cycles too. And let me actually go into that a little bit more. We've experienced boom cycles, and now times are changing. Times are changing. We have gone through a boom period. We've gone through like kind of flatline stages, and now our economy is heading into a new cycle. Well, many well-known economists have backed this as well, and even the Federal Reserve. And I mentioned a few names there, like Donald Trump, Robert Kiyosaki, Bill Bonner, Porter Stainsbury, and other people as well. The writing is on the wall. For example, some indications with the cost of living. I also will be sharing a little bit more about the Great Depression, so you can actually understand and see really similar patterns that we're following in today's society. And then also we're going to be going into strategies, like I said, but first we actually want to help you understand the facts behind it, because really this is all about education. So rise of cost of living, food, groceries, and fuel. This is definitely one major change that's happened in our economy cycle, is the rise of cost of living. And that's probably going to keep going. Inflation as well, like inflation has massively increased too. Interest rates increased again. That happened like, I think it was 2 weeks ago in the economy update I shared with Stephen, that they announced another interest rate increase. And that makes it 10 times over the last 2 years it's been increased. So it doesn't seem to be settling down, but that's a massive economic indicator. When you constantly see interest rates on the rise, that indicates something's happening. Crackdowns on retirement funds and taxes. Recently, the government came out saying that they're going to be cracking down and raising taxes on retirement funds, on superannuation, I should say, to about like 3 million or so was a certain tax was going to be taken out, and people are going to be struggling with retirement now. We're seeing that as well, is when you see stuff like that happening, it's a major indication. Retirement age increasing in Europe. Places like Italy, Germany, France, and different places and Greece as well, I'm pretty sure, are raising their retirement age because governments can't pay out like that many people's pensions, so they're needing to actually increase the retirement age. No doubt this will happen in Australia at some point. Obviously, that's just my own prediction or my own theory, just because generally we find anything happening in Europe or America is 5 years ahead of Australia. And just when you see that the governments are running out of money to pay people's pensions, you know it's a problem, and eventually something's bound to happen if it keeps happening. Australia will probably be in a similar position. Fractional reserve banking, we all know, for those of you that have seen the Money Masters or understand how the financial system works, just knowing the system and knowing fractional reserve banking, it's not sustainable for a long period of time. Eventually it's bound to collapse when you keep printing money out of nothing. And yeah, you keep printing money out of nothing and you've got a fractional reserve banking system. It's bound to not be sustainable. Also, 45, 90-year rule. Basically what this is that every 90 years, the economy resets. Every 45 years, there's something happen, but more specifically, every 90 years, the economy is bound to reset. It's now been about just about 90 years since the Great Depression. So we're right in that period. We're right in that 90-year cycle of when the economy is meant to collapse. And that's why it's really important to understand 90 years from the Great Depression, almost to the exact. And we're already seeing really similar patterns, and we're following the exact same things as the Great Depression. And the reality is, I'm not going to share too much of this because I've already mentioned that, but if you're not sovereign and financially independent, financial independence is a big one because, as we know, like governments control the world through their money, such as taxes and everything else. So if you don't have enough money to actually be able to pay for things and be able to get by, then you will be caught out in the recession, which is why it's important to understand the opportunities and be able to know where to look with investments and everything else. And on top of that, you'll miss out on the incredible opportunities which exist. So that's if you're not prepared, or if you're not solvent and you're still involved in other things. So I'm just going to move this chat bar. It's getting in the way of this writing sometimes. So to illustrate my point, let's take a look at the history of the Great Depressions and the signs leading up to it. Germany, 1923, what happened here was Germany's economy collapsed, their currency collapsed as well. This was in 1923, and Germany experienced its own economic collapse where a lot of people struggled, their system collapsed and whatnot. The Roaring Twenties, basically, those of you that understand the Roaring Twenties, was just before the Great Depression. There was a massive boom cycle where a lot of people were making money. They were getting really prosperous. It was a very successful time for a lot of people because you could pretty much have a good job, you could make a good income anywhere you worked, and there was a lot of opportunities out there, and many people were able to succeed in the Roaring Twenties. Like what we saw recently, there was a massive boom period where you could pretty much invest into cryptos, even if you literally knew nothing about cryptos and you just placed your money as a complete gamble, you could have become a crypto millionaire. And we saw that. We saw many people claiming to be crypto experts and teaching on it, who just happened to get lucky because of the booming economy. That's what happened in the Roaring Twenties. Stock prices soared, bond prices prospered, property kept rising in value, very similar to today. Properties are continuously rising in value as we're seeing. Cost of credit was low. So cost of credit was low, interest rates and whatnot, they were quite low, interest rates as well, like I just said there. Abundance of money was plentiful. So just when I'm reading through these guys, just think about our current economy and think about times past, probably the last decade or so, and just notice the resemblance. There's a lot of things that you see really similar happening. Wealth creation seminars galore. 1920s and the Roaring Twenties presented a lot of wealth creation seminars and a lot of people educating and whatnot. Think about the decades. How many seminars were there happening in the 2010 era? A lot of people making a lot of money off just weekend events and different things they were running and different trainings they were doing. That's settled down a little bit these days, especially as seminars as the world moves online. But we've recently experienced this galore of wealth seminars. Classic, like for example, Tony Robbins, and events were packing out. Everyone had the secret to riches. Back before the Great Depression, everyone had the secrets to riches. And how many people out there today do you see have the secret to riches? Like I was just saying with crypto millionaires and even business experts, business mentors, business coaches, investment coaches, property coaches, and everything else. How many people claim to have the answer to become wealthy and abundant? You could probably count like on two hands or so the amount of people that have claimed to be the best in the industry or whatever else. Everyone has the secret to riches because they just were able to capitalize on a booming economy. Suddenly it all changed though. Like after we saw all of these changes happening, then it all changed around 1928 or 1929 before the Great Depression actually really hit. Interest rates started to rise massively. People kept believing it would go forever. People were borrowing money more than ever. A lot of people were borrowing money. Everyone was basically buying stocks and buying assets, starting to invest because they thought it would be a good idea. And even taxi drivers were giving stock tips. And that's what I mean when I talk about anyone becoming a genius in wealth. I can't remember who exactly it was. It might have been, I can't remember his name, but someone, and this will actually be a lead up to one of the tips that we give, is that there was actually a wealthy investor who decided to sit in, like he was getting a taxi back to his workplace, back to his hedge fund, I think it was. And his taxi driver told him that he thinks he was saying to the guy to actually buy a certain stock because he thinks it's going to be the next big thing. And everyone else is buying it. So the guy was already invested into it, the investor. When he got back to his hedge fund, he pretty much told all of his staff to sell out everything they have of that stock because now the masses have caught on to it. Sure enough, they sold it off, and within a matter of time, the stock collapsed because people caught on, and it went from there. So that's why whenever you see those types of signs happening, you know it's probably an indication that something's going down. And let's look at the uncanny resemblance between today, like interest rates. That's a tick. We're already seeing interest rates continuously increase, and that's just not getting any slower. people kept believing it'd go forever. People believed COVID and the vaccines would go forever, and they didn't think it would end. People were borrowing money, and there's a lot more people borrowing money these days as well. People buying stocks and assets and cryptos, and different people giving tips because they're suddenly a genius in the area. October 1929, the Great Crash, times of plenty turned to poverty. And like obviously the roaring 20s, when people were successful, it suddenly turned into poverty just because economic cycles changed. 1930 to 32 was when the Great Depression actually hit and when the full effects were happening. There were a lot of suicides, as you saw before. There were a lot of suicides that raised, and we can already see the massive spike in unemployment and life expectancy and GDP growth. There were a lot of different fluctuations happening throughout this time. Big banks bought out small banks because suddenly there were a lot more things shutting down, like a lot more businesses shutting down, a lot more smaller branches shutting down, and corporations, wealthy people who knew what was happening were buying out things at a very cheap price. They were buying out small banks cheaper than they would ever before. They were buying up businesses at a much cheaper price than they could. Pharmaceuticals took over health in the Great Depression. We already saw this during COVID, as we all know, pharmaceuticals taking over health. People giving medical advice who probably don't even have medical degrees, and different people taking over our health system. Oil companies drove out their competitors. Increase in government regulation, we're no doubt already seeing that. There's plenty of regulations happening in a lot of different industries. 1933 was the executive gold seizure, when people were getting fed up. People were feeling the effects of things. Then suddenly Roosevelt announced the gold seizure, where he called in all of people's gold. So they no longer had a currency outside of the government's currency. And he called in all gold to be delivered to back to the system. America then went into bankruptcy after that happened. After Roosevelt called in all of the gold, the country went into bankruptcy. And then shortly after, World War II started. Obviously, it could have been for different reasons, but we can all agree that this was an interesting timeline, to say the least. And like 40 years later or so, gold standard happened, where the currency was no longer backed by gold or anything like that. And the question is, will we repeat the same pattern? So who wants to take a guess, or at least give your thoughts on it? Because me personally, from my own opinion, I don't think knowing humans and knowing what we're like as people, as a collective, I think we're not going to learn from history. I am fully convinced that people are not going to learn from history, especially the masses. I think people like who are listening here, people who are more aware of things and more sovereign, will probably learn from history. And that's why you're probably wanting to learn about topics like this and wanting to learn how to invest. But I think as a collective, as a society, that we will repeat the same patterns based on what we're seeing here. But what are your guys' thoughts? Just type a Y if you think we'll repeat the same patterns, or if you want to share your thoughts. It'd just be interesting to see if we're all on the same page. And while you're doing that, this training will probably run for about another, I'd say half an hour or so, just so you guys have the heads up. The content part of it maybe 15 or 20 minutes or so, and then the offer we'll be going through will be about another 10 minutes. So just so you guys have the heads up, I'll keep you updated on it. We've already got a couple of yeses. People think that we will not learn from history. Aiden, worse than that, people treat history with contempt. They hate it. It is true. Most people don't learn from history, and they actually resent it. I'll be the first to admit, when I was younger, I didn't really see the point in learning from history. Like, what was the point of learning the past? But now that I'm obviously in this industry, I can definitely see the importance of it, because you've got to be able to build towards the future, you've got to know the mistakes that were made in the past and learn from it. So yeah, we'll all agree. Based on history, the answer is yes. We have repeated similar times to this. We have actually repeated similar times to this, and no doubt there's been plenty of other times and instances, not just the Industrial Revolution, where people didn't learn from, but others as well. And I don't think it's going to be different. Considering we have never learned from history and we repeat the same mistakes like in world wars and all that, and even inflating economies, I don't see why it's going to be any different today. from my own opinion. And the exciting news, though, is despite all of that, times of crisis creates more opportunity, and now is the time to take action. The reason for that is because times of crisis create more opportunity. It's been actually said from the words of some multiple very successful investors and businessmen. It's come directly out of their mouth that times of crisis is the best time to become wealthy. Rockefeller, the way to make money is to buy when blood is running in the streets. And there were plenty of other people who said it, like the Rothschilds also said this, that when there's blood in the streets, that's the time to buy. And they're talking more about an investment standpoint or a business standpoint. But yeah, whenever there's blood in the streets, like, for example, where do you guys think that whenever there's wars happening and whenever there's literal blood filling the streets when there's wars, who's the one who gets wealthy from it? Is it the everyday person who's fighting in the wars, or is it the people funding it, like the Rockefellers and all of these different investors that go into it? It's them. They're the ones who get wealthy from those times. Obviously, I'm not saying that you should start investing into wars or whatever else, but you get the idea. There's plenty of opportunities that come up. Same with COVID, even more recently, that while everyone else was panicking, while everyone was having health issues because of, obviously, as we all know, what came out of it, but the pharmaceuticals and the elite governments were investing into health stocks, and Pfizer, for example, and they became billionaires from it. If they weren't already, they made so much money from that in times of crisis. So although you may not make your money from the same way as them unethically, let's just say that unethically, there's still other ways you can do it, and there's still opportunities that come through times of crisis which aren't there just in regular economic times. So the 1930 to 32 Great Depression, we all remember the Great Depression for ruining many lives. That's what's taught in school as well. Those of you that went to school and learned about the Great Depression, all that's really taught about this whole time of history is the impact it had on a lot of families financially and how it affected them mentally, emotionally, and whatever else. They had a lot of issues going on, and losing property, shares, lifestyle, and everything else. But what it never teaches you, what schools actually don't teach and what everything else doesn't teach, is the other side to the Great Depression. As I mentioned at the start, where many people were able to take advantage of it and make a lot of prosperity, make a lot of wealth just by taking advantage of the opportunities in a lifetime, by buying into certain industries and profit from the new world, because they knew the world was changing. They knew the old economy was done. They were stepping into a new economy, and they decided to go into new careers or new opportunities, new investments that were born out of the Great Depression. These were the ones who were educated, who stayed calm and were ready for it. Ready for it was very key. Who were able to adapt to is one thing that I didn't mention there, but people who were able to adapt are the ones who and stayed calm and were objective about things rather than panicking and rather than being caught up in the drama. These are the ones who were able to capitalize on it. That means while everyone else is still dealing with what has been, you can be part of the wealth transfer, which is still yet to come. And what I mean by that is that what has been is COVID. People get caught up in the drama. People get caught up in the past, saying that they hope they don't repeat the same mistakes of the past. But rather than doing that, you can still think of that. You can still think of the problems that happened before. But one massive way you can change things, and especially if you want to take advantage of the financial things out there, is switching your brain and mindset, because mindset, as we know, is a big thing when it comes to finances. And you'll hear many people talk about mindset. But one simple change you can make is just by simply switching from problem thinking to solution thinking, opportunity. So, for example, with COVID, rather than thinking about COVID as a problem, like thinking only about the issues like the vaccine, the jabs, masks, lockdowns, travel restrictions, and everything else, rather than only putting your thoughts and energy towards that, then put your thoughts and energy towards things like where can I look for investments, what's currently trending, what's going to be growing in the future, what's going to be an opportunity for me. Put your energy there, and within a matter of time, things will open up and you'll start looking in the right areas rather than being caught up in all of these other issues. So in fact, a greater percentage of millionaires were created in the Great Depression than almost any other time known in history. I don't know if that's changed now, but last time we heard, then this was actually the greatest number of millionaires, self-made millionaires I'll add as well. It was actually self-made millionaires created in the Great Depression than any other time ever in history. And if you don't take action, you'll miss out on these opportunities of a lifetime to prosper. And I don't really need to tell you that. We all know that. If you just sit down and just watch Netflix or just listen to music all day, and go to the beach or whatever and don't actually take any action, then obviously then you won't be able to capitalize on it. But I don't need to say that. Everyone knows that. And I added this here just for fun. Obviously, like if you're not taking action, you'd be better off to watch a Netflix movie. You've heard this quote a lot of times before, but it's always good, like I said, repetition. Plan for what is difficult while it is easy. When it comes to recessions, you always want to plan for what is difficult while it is easy. We all can agree planning for a recession, that's not easy and it's not fun. But I think we can all agree that it would be fun if we were prepared while it was easy and we were able to reap the rewards from it. Now, the difficult things in this world must be done while they are easy. The greatest things in the world must be done while they are still small. For this reason, sages never do what is great, and this is why they achieve greatness. So rather than waiting for a problem to happen and then going reactively off it, you're better off to actually see a problem or see an idea, like what I was talking about before, see an opportunity with AI and see an opportunity with technology. And rather than waiting until it's already successful, start actually planning into it and getting into it early in some form. Obviously, how you get into it, there's different ways, like whether you choose to be an investor into it, whether you choose to adopt technologies into your own business or into your own workplace, whether you choose more to actually, I don't know, what are some other examples? Like, yeah, more invest into it, more adopt the technology yourself to save staffing fees or save costs. There's plenty of ways that you can do it. More recently, here's what we didn't see or talk about. I actually want to give this more as a background, because as well as the Great Depression, there was also more things that we didn't see, because a lot of people have talked about the problems with COVID throughout the whole chaos that happened there. But here's some other stuff that we didn't see, or at least didn't talk about. People that were sovereign took advantage and did very well financially. What I mean by very well is that people we know, for example, were able to make profits of a lifetime through trading, and they pretty much made, I think they made it like in 1 month what they made in the previous financial year, just in 1 month, something crazy like that. And that's because they were able to see opportunities that were there. Top 20 net worth increase, like the top 20 elite, who are at the top of the net worth in the world, their net worth actually increased rather than declined. Investors found undervalued opportunities and made incredible profits from them. So, for example, people we know in our networks, once again, who are who invest into private businesses, they found opportunities because, like aviation, for example, being able to fly planes and all. Most people, while travel was locked down, and obviously we remember those times that planes were stopped from flying, travel was stopped down. So obviously the industry went down a lot. The price of aviation industry massively dropped. So certain people that bought into the aviation industry, started businesses from it, were able to get into that. And suddenly now it's increased now that planes are back up and now that the aviation has gone back to its value. That's because when chaos creates a lot of undervalued opportunities. Investors would know what I mean by that, when you can see something that's way undervalued for what it's worth. Even oil and gas during COVID suddenly had a massive price drop. And when you see that massive price drop and that deviation from its original price, then bought into it at a very low price, and now suddenly it's gone back up again. So then there's massive profits made there. So you find a lot of opportunities, especially if you look around in the stock market or look into different businesses that shut down. Another good example is that property as well. Like during COVID, there were so many vacant buildings that you could have bought for a lot less than what they would be worth now. Property prices like in COVID would have dropped significantly. Let's say you bought a property in COVID and now you own it now, the price would probably very likely already be increased. Traders made record-breaking returns in the stock market by understanding cycles. They knew exactly with the stock market that things don't last forever, and that was the big key as well. They knew things don't last forever. which is what I said before. But so understanding that concept that things don't last forever, they bought on a low price and then it just went back up when things settled down, and they were able to make good profits from it. A lot of people connected with solvent communities and networks. A lot of people, even Global Wealth Club, connected with great people around them too. There were a lot of good communities that formed from tough times. Rather than being caught in the drama, they focused on the opportunities. That's really what made sure everyone else, like these investors I'm talking about, business owners, that's what ultimately where they were able to do it. Here's how. To thrive and be prepared for the coming recession, really the key to be able to do it is just being sovereign in all 7 areas of your life. I'll share a little bit more, especially financially. So these are the 7 areas of your life: family, spiritual, mental, physical, social, career, and financial. To thrive in a recession, you would remember I was saying with the Industrial Revolution, people were not only struggling financially, but they were also having effects on their family life, because obviously with the financial burden, their family was now pressured as well. Their mental life was also pressured, physical, social, career, mental, emotional, and everything else. All of those different aspects of life were really pressured. That's why to actually be able to thrive, it's not just money, it's not just finances, but it's all of these different areas put together. But finances is the main one, because especially in a recession, when you're wealthy or when you have a good amount of income coming in, generally it reduces stress, and we can all agree on that. If you don't have it, you'll struggle to survive and thrive in today's world, especially like with a system that's really controlled by money. But now that that's out of the way, and now that we've actually gone through the history and some facts behind everything else, hopefully it's given you a bit of an idea of why we're heading for a recession and a bit of history behind it to actually understand it. And now really here's some simple strategies you can adopt to start adapting and become solvent and thrive in the recession. Like I said earlier, the idea of this is more to give you a bit of a framework and overview to start working with. Some more practical stuff and more in depth, like looking at different investments and looking at different opportunities, would be done in another training if there's enough interest, and whatever else, because we could run this like a series on thriving in a recession rather than just doing one training on it. But this will be a really good overview that you can take away to actually get started. Number 1 is think proactive and not reactive. When it comes to recessions and when it comes to thriving in them, ask any trader out there, ask any wealthy person out there what their secret is, and they will always tell you to start off with your mindset. I'm sure most of you here have done some kind of wealth course or some kind of trading course or wealth course or anything like that, and you would have heard mindset many times, but it's so much different. I remember when I was first starting out, because I obviously started learning this from a young age, I always found like the concept of mindset really annoying. I just wanted to get straight into the more practical stuff in finances and whatever else. And every time mindset was brought up, I'm like, I don't care about that. Just show me everything else. But you realize that mindset actually is important, and being able to think proactive rather than reactive. What I mean by that is, rather than waiting for the problem to happen, actually think ahead and be prepared. That's why with automation, for example, and the age of AI, and understanding that that's literally where we're heading and where we are now, rather than waiting for a problem to happen, like rather than waiting for you to lose your job and then thinking of a career change and thinking of a way to make more money, think about your career right now. Is it going to be a survive in the coming times? If it's a no, well, then start preparing for it and start actually learning ways to generate income outside of your current job. If you're currently invested into certain industries or invested into different things, rather than waiting for them to suddenly go bust and suddenly lose a lot of value, think about whether the times we're heading into, whether the price will drop or whether the price will increase, and make a decision from there. So really think ahead. Don't just try not to just wait for a problem to happen. Because if there's one thing we learned from COVID, it's that hindsight is a great thing, because if we were prepared for it, imagine how much easier life would have been. So learn from that. Ideally, let's try not to be like everyone else, but we don't learn from history. So knowing there's a recession coming, knowing there's going to be a reset of the economy and the financial system and currency, like the World Economic Forum has already said it. So now that we know it, rather than waiting for it to happen, think proactively. and know how to do it. So like a squirrel, squirrels prepare their nuts in autumn, not winter. They know that's the time. They know that when they gather their nuts, winter will come and they'll be stocked up. When you apply that concept to your finances, start preparing now before the winter comes or the storm comes, and you'll be really well looked after. Think about worst case scenario for each area of your life and prepare accordingly. So it's not just finances you've got to think about. Finances is the number one thing though. So do think about finances. Like finances can be broken down into different areas, like your career. That's a big one. The way you're currently making your cash flow or income. Think about whether that's going to be sustainable for the future. Think about your investments. Think about your assets and protecting them, and whatever else. So this includes your health. Thinking about that, because let's say that suddenly the health system changes or something happens to your health all of a sudden. Are you prepared for it? That's a big one. Surrounding yourself with good community and family, having really good family relationships and good community. Family doesn't just mean your direct family. Family is people who are aligned with your values and aligned with your path. So make sure you're surrounded by them. We can all agree the importance of good community, because as well as working on this on your own journey, like finding your own finances, finding your own feet, community is a big part of that, which accelerates your growth and accelerates results. Having a stable income or cash flow, kind of what I said before, but you actually want to make sure you've got a stable income or cash flow to be able to do it. Because if you don't actually have an income to be able to make money, well, how are you going to be able to invest, and how are you going to be able to be an investor and make money in businesses or anything else if you don't have a good cash flow? So that's a really big part of it. And always start with one step at a time. If you don't currently have a cash flow, well, then just start there and then look at investments later on. Growing multiple streams of income once you have a stable cash flow. If you already do have a stable cash flow, then the next step for you would be looking at like either building multiple income streams or investments, having your assets well protected, and having your assets well protected. So asset protection more comes in once you've got a good cash flow base, or once you've got different things. That's really important. But obviously, if you don't have a good cash flow and you don't really have any assets to protect, you don't need to worry about that, just because you'll waste money on things you don't even need. And even knowing your basic legal rights, because if you do face any disputes or problems, then at least knowing that you can defend yourself and know that you can stand up for yourself and your legal rights. There's plenty more as well. Number 2, master your money management, because as well as like what I was saying, if you don't have a good cash flow, if you're not putting money aside towards your investments, how are you going to find opportunities and capitalize on them if you can't even afford to be in them? So that's why it's important that money management, you're constantly making sure you've got a good income and you're managing it well to actually be able to be in these opportunities. Organized wealth attracts more wealth is a quote said by John Demartini, who is a great wealth expert, a great spiritual teacher, and really well known in this area. It's a universal law. Think of it like health. If you're organized in your health and you have a consistent routine, you have you know your diet, you know, have a good sleep schedule, you have exact days that you train and a good program you're following, then eventually you'll lose weight and you'll achieve your health goals. Let's say you decide that you're spontaneous with your health. Every day you eat what you feel like, you train when you feel like it. When you're feeling lazy, you don't bother going. When you feel like training, like you've trained 2 days a week, 1 week, 3 days, another 4 days, another 0, another. You're eating whenever you feel like, you're sleeping whenever you feel like, you're drinking alcohol whenever you feel like it, then what are your results going to be? Obviously, you're not going to exactly get the best health results. So same thing with finances. If you have clear budgets, you have clear income allocations, and you have organized bank accounts and the way that you manage your money, then you'll attract more wealth. It's just a natural process. And if you have good investment like processes and good business processes and all that, then naturally you'll attract more wealth and you'll be able to be like grow it better than if you're just being spontaneous, where you're spending when you feel like it. You don't know what's coming in and out of your account. You just kind of manage your money sporadically and everything else. So that's why I said, have good budgets. So budgets, what I mean by that, knowing exactly what comes in and out, making sure that you've got clear limits and not just overspending, making sure that you don't spend more than you earn, having clear income allocation systems. So for example, those of you that attended our money management workshop last month, you would know what I mean by this, but actually having clear systems to allocate your income. So between your normal account, your general spendings, your savings, your investment account, and making sure that those different accounts you have set up for yourself, you've got very clear amounts that are going into it every week rather than just what you feel like. And then also setting up a solid financial plan. So these are more basic stuff, more basic strategies, just because when it comes to a recession, you realize that it's actually the simple things that make people survive and succeed. So these are, as well as being thriving, these are also really good survival techniques, just because it's always the simple things, because whenever a recession comes, you've really got to lean out. You've got to make sure your money management is tight. And rather than waiting for that problem to happen, rather than waiting till you're forced to cut back on expenses, you may as well get started with it now. And actually, you follow these principles to be well prepared. Because if you're constantly building your investment account and you've got good money moving between your different accounts, then at least you can be prepared and start investing, and also being prepared for a recession. Number 3, upskill your career or income, especially when the world is moving faster than ever and times are changing. Like we're moving more towards robots and AI, like I said. There's a lot more different things happening in the world, but making sure you can upskill your career or income to be able to do it. So if you're a business owner, thinking about ways you can upskill your business to actually bring in AI technology. For example, with our businesses, we've been looking at a lot more ways to actually automate different tasks that our staff members do, just because it will save time, it will save energy, and it will save mistakes. So we've been looking at that ourselves. Stephen has been introducing different technologies into his businesses to free up time, energy, and even money. So those are obviously, the more money you save, the more you earn. So that's an additional income there, just saving money. But if you're working a job as well, thinking about ways you can create multiple income outside of your day job, or thinking about ways that you can make yourself indispensable in your workplace. Because as you know, whenever recessions hit, then businesses look to cut staff. And if you're a regular staff member, or if you don't really add any more value than everyone else, then unfortunately they'll probably look at you at firing you just to lean out. Whereas if you make yourself indispensable and you develop skills that can go above and beyond your role at your workplace, then you want to make yourself indispensable, especially if you like having a stable income from a job. Because once you've got that stability, you can use your income to go into different investment opportunities. Then find a way to earn income independently from governments or employers. That's what I was just saying there. Because if you purely rely on an employer to give you income, then what happens if you suddenly lose your job? You're going to have to be reactive, because if you deal with the problem once it happens, once you get fired, once a robot replaces your job or something, then that's going to cause all kinds of chaos and possibly struggle for you, or stress, which could easily have been avoided if you prepared for it in advance. That's why ways you can create income independently from governments or employers is investments. That's a big way. A lot of people choose the investment route. Other people choose to start up a side business or a side hustle. And there's just different ways that you can choose to do it. And that's why it's important to be educated on the different ways you can and start actually doing and taking action. Because the reality is, the reason you actually want to be financially independent and actually have an income away from the employer or government is because it's far easier for governments to control people who don't have money. We see this with taxes. We see this in throughout COVID, throughout tough times. Governments find it so much easier to control people who, number one, don't have money, or number two, are heavily involved into the system. Like, they don't have good structures set up. They don't have good principles or anything like that. And they don't actually know their rights. That's a big one too. That's why common law rights and knowing that's really important. Because if you don't know how to stand up for yourself, it's going to be so much easier for governments to control you. And to be financially independent, really what the key is to actually be on the right side of this cash flow quadrant here, which is done by Robert Kiyosaki. So at least start the journey to move towards the right side of this quadrant here, if you haven't already. To be financially independent, you've either got to be a business owner where you own a system and you're actually making money from other people's efforts, rather than, whereas employee, you're making money from your time, or you're self-employed, you're making money from your skill set and your time as well. Whereas business owner, you're number one, you're relying on yourself. So you actually are financially independent. You can make money without relying on the employer. And then investments too, you're making money from independently from an employer or someone paying you for your time. So that's why you've got to somehow figure a way to move on to here. And you can actually be in multiple quadrants. What we find a lot of clients decide to do, and a lot of people that we work with, is they actually like being an employee or a business owner, but they make their income from being an employee or being a business owner, and then they make additional income from being an investor. That's one way you can look at it, because basically really what you want to be doing is having a good income. You can choose to do that either as a business owner, self-employed, or employee, but ultimately you do want to be on the investor quadrant. That's why. So when I talk about moving to the right side, it doesn't mean you have to be both on the right side. As long as you're one of them, that's going to be a way you can generate a good income independently from governments or employers. Understand early which industries will succeed and which ones won't, because when you actually can understand the industries that will succeed, the ways that you understand this is obviously by looking at history, but history sometimes isn't the best indication, especially because times are changing. Like obviously AI wasn't around back then, so you can't really use that as a way to indicate which industries will be successful. But you can also educate yourself by knowing people who are successful in the area, and actually just look at what they're doing, because the best way and easiest way to do it is just look at what successful people are doing and copy them. Rather than trying to figure out for yourself, you can save yourself time, money, and effort by just looking at what other successful people are doing and then just copying them. For example, Bill Gates, like he's buying up a lot of farmland right now. So just knowing he's buying a lot of farmland, well, maybe that's going to be an industry that's going to succeed a lot. Different investors are going into different industries, and that's going to be a really good one to understand, which I don't have time to go into today, different industries. But like I said, if there's enough interest, then we'd be happy to do a series on it. Strategy 4 is be a contrarian. What I mean by that is think differently. Think differently to the masses. When the masses are thinking one thing, do the other. Like that story I told you before, when the taxi driver, when the everyday person has caught onto a trend, you know it's probably already past its glory. People make their money before it gets the hype, because they get in early, and once it reaches all the hype, then the price goes up and they sell out once it's at the top. That's what a contrarian will think. That's how traders, investors, and business owners make their biggest profits, is because when they know how to get in early to something, then rather than waiting for it to be at the top and then getting in once everyone else is caught on. Warren Buffett, who, as we know, hopefully you know who this guy is, just probably the most successful investor out there. He says to be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. Because when everyone else is fearful, when they think everything's crashing, when they think the stock market is going down, that's the time to be greedy, and that's the time to buy in. If other people are being greedy, like the masses are being greedy, and they're thinking everything's going to go up and now is the time to get in, that's when you want to be fearful and start considering selling out. Another quote here: when there's blood on the street, I am buying. That's very counterintuitive thinking as well, because everything in you, when you're an investor, you want to hold on, and you want to really get into things early, or you want to kind of go into things when it feels like it's going up. But oftentimes it's really counterintuitive when you make a decision. I'm sure anyone out there who invests knows what I mean, that your emotions can really get you into trouble. So it's important to manage your emotions. Strategy 5, grow an asset base. This is another part of making sure you can capitalize on opportunities, is actually grow an asset base. Understand the Book of Wealth by H. Bancroft. So we've taught about this a lot to our members, but this Book of Wealth teaches very good principles, which are listed here. So take a long-term perspective of things rather than only thinking short-term. Actually think long-term. That's why I was saying to think ahead. When it comes to thriving in a recession, when you're thinking about opportunities, rather than waiting for a short-term thing to pop up, think about a future thing that will possibly do it. Because that way, if you think ahead, you're able to get into things early. Whereas when you're only looking at things that are trending right now, who knows how much longer they'll go. Whereas when you can get into something really early, it's much different. History of wealth created by great civilization. That was the first principle there. creating wealth is about solving problems. That's especially the case for business owners. So if you're a business owner out there, the way to make more money is by thinking about better ways you can solve more problems for more people. Stability is most important. That's why having a stable income is really important. Having stable financial management systems as well. And also finding ways to invest that stability to keep growing it. Safety first with stable return. That's a really big one. Think risk averse. Some of the greatest investors out there, as much as you hear about taking risks, they are also actually really risk averse and know how to manage their risks. Once they get the risk out of the way, that's when they go all in. So rather than investing with your emotions, you want to think risk averse and look for stable returns as much as possible, as well as obviously the high returns out there for quick cash flow or anything like that when you have the opportunity to. Another big thing too is access to capital and creating infrastructure. That's why if you're looking to take advantage of different opportunities out there, you actually want to make sure you do have capital available to you, because as you know, sometimes you can get into investments and things for free if you're working with the right people. But if ultimately you do need to have capital available to you, whether it's your own, whether you manage other people's money or something like that. So if you don't have access to manage other people's money, then you want to make sure you can grow your own capital through different ways, like creating a good income and managing your money well, and also understanding volatility and speculation. Rather than letting that control you, make sure you actually understand it. Also, the balanced portfolio, especially recessions, because who knows what's going to happen during recessions? No one knows. Sometimes we think one thing will happen and then a completely different thing happens. And if you invest all your eggs into one basket, like if you choose to go all in into gold, well, what happens if another thing happens like that gold seizure that happened in 1933? Suddenly you realize all your wealth is suddenly lost. When you thought gold was going to go up in value, now you have nothing left, because if it gets called in or gets seized, then you now have lost all your wealth and all your capital. Whereas if you diversify into different things like gold, cash, stocks, and bonds, and that gold is only 25% of your portfolio because you have a feeling that gold may go up during a recession, and you feel like certain stocks will also go up in the recession. But if suddenly your gold goes down or gets seized, although it will hurt nowhere near as much if your stocks go up and your cash goes up while your gold gets taken away, because it'll balance out or make more. You can also include different things like property in your balanced portfolio. You can include crypto. The balanced portfolio really is what you make it out to be, as long as it's in different industries. Like precious metals is another thing, and there's different ways you can make up your balanced portfolio. That's a big key to actually prosper in a recession, is not just assuming things, because as we know, recessions can create different ways to what we ever thought it would be. So balance your portfolio out rather than thinking one thing and going all in. Just balance it out, because that's a common principle you're taught in any wealth thing, for safety. Because if you go back here, it's all about safety first. Invest in rising industries when no one else is seeing them. So when I talk about rising, really you want to actually get into them, ideally before they start, or if you see an early spike or anything else. Another thing I'll chuck in there too is, as well as getting into rising industries, the biggest secret that makes most people their money is when they get into undervalued markets. So when they're able to see a price of something really drop, they buy at a low. So they buy low and then sell high. That's a common strategy, but obviously you've got to know what you're doing with that. Strategy 6, connect with the right community. The reason community is important is because it accelerates results. You also get different benefits like accountability, people there to help you. Communities help each other because one person may be skilled in one area and another one may be in another area, and you can complement each other. And that's why community is really important. It's a well-known fact too that who you surround yourself is who you become. If you're surrounded by 5 idiots, you'll probably become an idiot. If you're surrounded by 5 smart, intelligent, and sovereign-driven people, then you'll probably feed off their wavelength and be able to get better results. That's why it's important to do that. there's a good reason why the elite only hang around a small network. I think we all notice that the elite don't just hang around the peasants, as they probably would call it. They only hang around with their own families and their own groups because they know the importance of the energies and the people you surround yourself with. Strategy 7.2 is get yourself educated. You can't become sovereign and wealthy if you're running around like a headless chicken. So getting yourself educated is really important, just because it's one thing to try to figure things out yourself. But I know for me personally, I prefer learning from the mistakes of others just because it saves me making the mistake myself, and saves me a lot of stress and I'm happy to do it that way. That's just me personally. Hopefully most people are the same, rather than wanting to learn the mistake yourself. I just find it's a lot easier, saves time, saves money, and saves stress. That's why getting educated is really important. Having the right mentors, programs, and even communities around you to learn the necessary skills to be sovereign. That's why if you can surround yourself with good investors, surround yourself with good business owners, or just good people in general, you'll generally do a lot better, especially in a recession. Now, how do you put it all together? That's pretty much the overview. That's all the tips or strategies that we'll give. That really is what we follow ourselves when it comes to preparing and thriving in a recession. Start with the basics. That's why it's in that order. So start with the basics of getting your money management in plan, becoming an investor, moving to the right side of the quadrant, having the right community around you, having good education around you. And when you put all of those different things together, then you'll be in no time be on your way to prospering in a recession. Obviously, now the next step from here, like I said at the start, the idea of this training was more to give you an overview to things, give the foundation, so you at least have something to get started with. If you're interested more in running a training on different like investment avenues that we are looking into ourselves, or different tips that we have more from our own opinions and whatnot, let me know in the chat before we go into the offer, because it'd just be good to get some feedback. So if we did run a training on investment avenues and everything else that we believe may prosper, just type a Y in the chat if that's something that would interest you, just so that I can get an idea. Because obviously the purpose of this was more to give an overview. But if we did run a training on that, there would be no financial advice. It'd be another general training, but more focused around investments, rather than being a whole, what do you call it? Rather than focused on different areas, it would be purely around investing on businesses. It wouldn't be any financial advice. It'd just be general stuff. Yeah, multiple income streams, that's the answer. Yeah, for sure. Multiple income streams and multiple investment, investment sectors too. Just multiple of anything. I've been taught that one is a dangerous number, because if you've only got one thing available to you and suddenly it goes, then yeah, you're screwed. So that's why multiple income streams, at least having multiple income streams, multiple asset bases as well, is really important parts to surviving a recession and preparing. So yeah, getting a few yeses, so that's good to see. So yeah, we'll definitely look at running a training on it. How do you invest though? There's different ways you invest, just depending on what you want to invest into. And yeah, all right. So that's pretty much all of the principles we had there for you guys. Hopefully that gives you something to get started with. And now we're going to be walking through different ways to actually, like I said at the start, actually put it all together in a more practical sense, because we do have a membership and a program that all the stuff I was saying on money management and investing and creating income, we actually have a lot more practical trainings on our one of our memberships, which I want to run you through, which for those of you that want to stick around and understand what's involved in it, we'll be walking through now. But for those of you that just came for the content, who didn't come for the offer or anything, I really do want to thank you for your time as usual. It means a lot. It was great to see your engagement through today, and hopefully you got a lot of value out of today's training. And if you have any questions, just feel free to ask them away or send us an email or anything like that, and we'll be happy to help. But that's pretty much it from the content side of things. And once again, thanks. Just out of curiosity, I noticed a few members on here, which is really nice to see. It's good to see members enjoy coming to the free stuff as well. But who would be interested to listen to the membership and seeing ways that you can actually learn more of this stuff in a more practical sense, and getting access to community and everything else? just out of curiosity, who's interested to hear more about the program and membership. Thank you so much. What a wonderful seminar. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. I'm glad you really enjoyed it. Thanks for being here. Yeah, cool. Got a few people interested to go through it. So what we'll do now is, and yeah, people asking for recommendations. Those of you that are asking for recommendations or anything like that, unfortunately, like I said at the start with the disclaimer, we can't give any advice or specific recommendations. If you are looking for that, you're best off to just book a call with us or go on our website, globalwealthclub.com. There's an inquire page on our website. There's an inquire button at the top right corner. So www.globalwealthclub.com. Click the inquire. Actually, no, that's probably not the best way. We actually don't give advice, so just sorting it out. But if you are looking for specific recommendations, we don't give any advice. Like I said, just go see a financial planner and you'll be able to go from there. If you don't have any financial planners, then you're best off to look for one, or if you have any friends that know a good financial planner, just ask them. We can educate you to empower you in your investment decisions, but in terms of actual advice around investing, then you're best off to see one. So anyway, we'll get underway. So thanks for those of you that are interested. And we'll share more about ways you can actually learn to apply what I was just teaching there, as well as get more actual education, guidance, and community to help you achieve those results, especially investing and creating income and multiple income streams and whatnot, showing you ways that you can actually do it. The pathway to sovereignty, really what I mean by sovereignty is being independent from government and employers. That's what sovereignty really means, is the ability to be independent from a government body or an employer, whether that's financially and in all areas of your life. So here's the actual doorway to actually get to sovereignty, because before we actually walk into the program, it's important to understand the blueprint. Think of it kind of like the gym. Before you actually get to your health goal, and you get things like you actually start learning about it and you start paying your personal trainer, you've got to actually understand the roadmap to get there. So when it comes to finances, this is what we have. This tier system was designed by a mixture of Warren, Stephen, and various other people we have in our networks from their own journeys in growing wealth and being able to prepare for recessions. This was developed from them. And what this basically is a tier structure which symbolizes different stages that you go through on your wealth journey. And depending where you're at is where you focus on first. You get into place in your life and your finances, then you move on to the next one. So tier one is all about starting. I'm going to more give you an overview of this just to walk through it and be able to make sure we save time. But tier one is when you're starting the journey. So there's certain things you learn in there. There's certain things you learn in creating an income. So if you haven't got a stable income right now, then this is where you start, is actually creating an income. Once you've got that stable income in your life, you then look at expanding your wealth and creating multiple income streams and multiple investments. Then you look at, once you've got that in your life, you then look at protecting assets, because now that you actually have assets and investments available to you, you then want to be able to protect it rather than like having it at risk to governments or risking losing it to lawsuits or whatever else, different issues that come with growing wealth. As you'll find out, new levels, new devils, you want to make sure it's protected. So that's tier 4. Tier 5 is, once you've got that, is finding freedom globally. So actually making sure that, and also financial freedom. So you want to make sure that your time, the way you make your money is not just limited to your time. So that's what's focused on in tier 5, is actually learning how to make money without your time or presence being required in your business or investments, as well as just lifestyle freedom. So being able to travel, being able to have second passports and residencies and going offshore, so that your life isn't just restricted to Australia, especially if regulations tighten up here. You want to have a backup option to move out with your family. 6 is about personal mastery, because once you've got your wealth in place, you find that the next step of your life is actually living your purpose and finding what that means to you, having spiritual growth and everything else. That's what tier 6 is focused on. And tier 7 is all about leaving a legacy, because now that you've gone through this whole journey yourself, your final step of living is leaving a legacy and teaching others how to do the same thing. And that's what our programs are designed for. The one I'll be walking you through today is more focused around tier 2 and 3, because most people we find who come to us start off around this level and then work their way up to tier 4, 5, 6, and 7. Pretty much what I've done here as well, I'm not going to go through this in depth, but this is the overview of the roadmap you go through. And this is more the steps that you actually do and what you actually learn through the programs we run. Tier 2, I'll start off here because most people are around tier 2 or 3. You can read this for yourself or skim through it as I speak. But tier 2 is all about upskilling your career, learning ways to do that, becoming financially literate. So, for example, knowing how to manage your money well, knowing how to understand investments, understand theory behind it. Because finances, as we know, is a very complicated topic. It can be complicated and it's a huge rabbit hole to go down. Because when you learn about one topic, there's just another one that pops up. And when you feel like you've got the hang of investing, then there's something else that comes up. And we, no doubt everyone knows that. And so that's what you learn there is like different simple strategies you can do to become financially literate, get the basics in place like budgeting, money management, income allocation, and what I was talking about before, ways you can purchase your first asset. And that's all about creating income. Tier 3 is all about expanding wealth, and these are the steps you do to learn that. And actually through our programs you learn to implement in your life is starting a business, setting up your first structure, operating like a business, not an employee, and start investing for multiple income streams and residual income. Then tier 4 asset protection is actually learning how to use structures and using more advanced stuff legally, minimizing taxes legally, mastering your education. Tier 5, which is about freedom, is learning about how to expand your portfolio, implement the balanced portfolio, because that's more advanced. Balanced portfolio is more when you're actually at tier 5. Then you learn how to do that, bulletproofing, recession-proofing your portfolio, as we like to call it. And then also going global, so getting second passport citizenships, being like a digital nomad and not being limited to one jurisdiction. Then also freeing yourself from your business, so that way, you're not being limited. Your time and your presence is not required to earn an income. That's going to be really key for recession, is actually not being limited to that. And also around tier 2 to 5, like all around these tiers, you learn along the way about different ways to find opportunities and investments that will survive a recession, will be able to prosper just from different people. Tier 6, this is what you learn here. It's a lot about self-mastery and family legacy. And 7 is all about leaving a legacy to everyone else around you and your community. Now, where to from here? So pretty much what we're going to be going through is the Global Wealth Club Ignite program. This is the one I wanted to focus on today, just because I know most people around tier 2 or 3. If you are higher than that and you feel like you're more around tier 4 or 5, you're best off to reach out to support at globalwealthclub.com, and one of our team will be able to contact you, because that requires a lot more different programs. But if you're around this level and you're looking to create your stable income or looking to create multiple income streams, then this program is going to be really good for you. The problem the program actually solves is the following. The Ignite program, we actually set it up because we wanted to design a program that solves the problem of having to go to different places or experts to learn how to become sovereign and financially independent. What I was talking about before, when I was mentioning about finances being a really difficult, difficult can be a bad connotation, but we all can agree, finances, there's so many different things you've got to learn. You've got to learn about money management. You've got to learn about mindset. You've got to learn about investing. You've got to learn about asset protection. You've got to learn about taxes, bookkeeping. And there's just a lot of different topics that comes with finances and sovereignty that if you go to 10 different people for, can be really overwhelming and complicated. What we've done with Global Wealth Club is we wanted it to be a one-stop shop to actually learn all of that stuff in one place from some of the best people in the area, or people who know what they're doing and have achieved success in that area that they teach on, and make it easy for you and streamline. Streamlining is really important, and that's what we've looked to do here and what we've designed in this program. So who it's for, like I said, it's more around tier 2 or 3. It's really about people who are wanting to actually create that initial cash flow or learn about investing and just have a good starting point. And you're starting out your sovereignty journey with basic savings and minimal investments. You feel overwhelmed on where to start. want to be shown practical steps to master your finances by knowing how to manage money better, grow your income and start investing, and interested to learn financial management plus universal laws to balance the practical with esoteric. The program actually is a lot about mixing finances with the holistic and esoteric. That's a big part of it as well, is because universal laws, as we all know, when you have all of those working together, can achieve wealth at a much quicker rate. The main outcome is it moves you through tier 2 and 3. It gives a blueprint to escape the matrix and recession, as we've been talking about. And we just added that line about giving the government the middle finger, because when a lot of things are believed to be government induced, then you want to be able to give them the middle finger and show them that everything they're trying to do and they're trying to induce on you is not going to work. So we've added that line there for a bit of humor and whatnot, and ultimately secure your future. In the program, there's really 3 parts to it that actually make up this program. The first part is education, which is the biggest part of it. On-demand, step-by-step financial mastery training videos. So everything ranging from money management, it's really structured. So money management, everything you saw there in tier 2 and 3, step-by-step, like around a mindset, money management, understanding recessions in greater depth, understanding the theory behind it, as well as the ways to invest, different asset classes you can invest into, because as we know, there's plenty of different places you can invest, like property, crypto, stocks, and everything else. So you get a bit of an introduction to that. Live weeklies, webinars weekly. So really what we do with these weekly webinars is all the time we have series running. Our next series that we're actually running is starting next Thursday on 4:30. We've got a really good series. So if you're actually looking to learn investing, this is actually a really good time to get involved, because we've got a great person speaking on property investing, which is going to be a 13-week course, a 13-week series, which is going to be only available to members. So that's going to be the next one starting on the 1st of June. All our members have been really looking forward to it, as have I, because I've been wanting to do property myself. So I'm really looking forward to hearing her speak. And also free entry into any online workshop or course that we run. And we've run a few in the past few months and have a few planned out, which members can come along to for free. Number 2 is community. Community is a really big part of it. Right now, we've got a good online community where a lot of people are finding a lot of value in that, and definitely will be a more physical presence there as well with the community. But there's access to the forum, access to different networks and members discounts. Like, for example, if you want to use implementation services, or you're looking to, as an example, looking to purchase metals or offshore, like gold or silver offshore, we do have contacts available where for being a member, you also get a discount with storage fees and things like that. Also access to special live events that we run from time to time. Then also the third pillar is support and accountability. Although it mostly is self-guided and on-demand, this program, we wanted to also have a factor in here, which you also do get some access to one-on-one support in case you need it, because as we know, investing and finances can be quite a big area to overcome. So having support is really important, and that's why there's an onboarding call available to you with a qualified financial planner, with one of our team members who is a great guy, and he pretty much walks you through the process of finances, welcomes you to the club, goes through those formalities, and also kind of comes up with a plan, similar to a personal trainer, of based on your goals, how you can actually get there and the best pathway for you to go on. That's the purpose of the onboarding call. The quarterly check-in calls, those are done by phone or Zoom or something like that. Or of course, if you're in Perth, where we live, you can also request in person. But the purpose of that is to check in on you, just to make sure the goals that you've set and the plan that you've come up with, you're working towards it. Anywhere you're stuck, there's the purpose of those that they're there to help you in case you need support and all that. And you also get access to email support throughout when you're not talking to someone in person. There's 2 options to join. Number 1 is $99.70 a month. So it's actually this, as you saw there, there's a lot of value involved with this program. And what we've done here is we wanted to make it really affordable, because we know when it comes to wealth, there's everyone's got to start somewhere. So especially around tier 2 or 3, we really wanted to give a great starting point, an affordable starting point to people who want to have this opportunity. And the 2 options is number 1, which is $99.70 a month. People who more want to feel their way into it and kind of just have a starting point, choose this option for $99.70 a month with a minimum 3-month commitment. or for people who want to actually commit straight away and get started for 12 months because they know they need it. A lot of clients choose to go ahead with that just because it saves a little bit of money if you choose to do 12 months upfront rather than monthly, just because it saves about, I think it works out to be two months or so, about just under $200 it works out to be. So you're effectively getting 2 months free if you choose upfront for 12 months. That's $997. So it actually works out to be cheaper than Foxtel and buying coffee every day. We were chatting with our team about that it actually works out to be cheaper than that, because if you buy a coffee every day, roughly for around $6, 5 days a week, for a month, it works out to be over, like, I think it's somewhere around $150 or so. And that's why it works out to be a lot cheaper doing this and educating yourself on finance as it does buying a coffee and listening to Foxtel and all. So those are the two options to join. Any questions, or anyone got any comments or anything like that before we move forward? Or anyone interested to join? But while people are typing questions or typing about joining, I'm going to quickly stop sharing the screen and just realized there was something in one of the slides I've got to quickly fix up. So feel free to ask any questions, guys, or chuck in your comments while I fix this up here. And hopefully you got a lot of value out of this. Really, like I said, the purpose of this was to give you a great introduction to the topic around recession. I think most people listening here would at least have some idea of a recession. And yeah, if you do, then hopefully you got a lot of value out of this. So I'm just quickly fixing up one of the slides that I have after this to make sure it's all good. Any comments while I'm doing this, Warren? Any comments for you? Because I noticed you're on here as well. Any comments you want to throw in there? My mouse, I'm just having trouble actually getting this to work.
Yeah, look, basically getting some kind of education is a fantastic starting point. And I often tell people that when I started, in fact, I've been telling clients lately, but when I started my financial journey myself many years ago, there was two things I did. Number one was I educated myself. And secondly, I actually went and got some financial advice from someone. So that's why we very much along the lines of, I personally see financial planners like doctors. Doctors and GPs obviously have their limits, and that's why many go to alternative health and look at that. But at the end of the day, if I got an infection or something like that, I'll see a doctor, and then I'll do my own stuff as well. So financial planners have a part because they can at least give you what I call a foundation. The other thing I did was educate myself, because obviously financial planners are very limited within the scope of what they can advise based on laws, regulations, and things like that. So self-education is a very, very profound thing, and I cannot say strongly enough, but if you really do want to be sovereign, you want to be empowered yourself. So even if you're sitting down with an accountant, financial planner, doctor, you want to know what you're on about. And as people found out during COVID, for example, just doing what the doctor told them, I mean, if you get sick, it's your body that wears the thing. And likewise, if you do what a financial planner tells you, or what anyone tells you and doesn't work out for you, well, you're the one that wears it. So I strongly encourage people to, yes, see one, and then also to do some kind of education. So the idea of the Ignite is to really empower people and give you that foundation, like in everything from legal rights, common law rights foundation, various different asset classes, so you can get familiar, but you can get educated, but you can get empowered, and then decide what you want to go into. So for yourself. So that's the whole idea of the Global Wealth Hub, to really empower people to become sovereign. So if you're really serious about doing that, especially around that tier 2 or perhaps early tier 3, it's a great way to get started. As Edward rightly said, it's cheaper with my Foxtel subscription. I think I pay $138 a month, and that gets me unlimited kind of things. I can watch sport and all that, but this is actually cheaper than that. And you're getting education that can help you get empowered, and may very well be the difference between you getting your way through the recession and what's to come, and you being caught out by it and not being upskilled efficiently and things like that. So that's just my comment on the whole thing. So I cannot encourage you strongly enough to take some kind of action, invest in your education, and do it basically, pretty much every day you wait, is every day that you don't have that knowledge and that understanding that can get you started.
Couldn't agree more. I think 3 months as well. Those of you that prefer a risk averse, not much to lose there as well if you're going to give it a go, because there's especially if this is something you've been looking at doing or looking to get into investments. I'm more just saying this because I know property is a big thing too that a lot of people have been wanting to learn about. And we're running a good series on that, which will roughly be for about 3 months. So that'll be starting next week. So it'll be a good time to actually get in and try that out.
Well, thank you, Edward. That was fantastic. Really, really good presentation. I'm sure everyone would agree here. Great knowledge and very important to understand the history, because my experience is that what has been in the past tends to repeat itself. So generally on average, I think it's about every 90 years, there was a study I read which shows some kind of major depression, recession, or change in the whole system. And so generally we hit booms, we hit depressions, we hit booms, we hit depressions, recessions, and we're definitely right now, based on what we've seen previously certainly the beginning of it in some form, and definitely in a major change into this age of AI. And I personally have been stunned by what I'm seeing. I mean, I'm seeing, for example, like AI was able, the title for this webinar was literally, I'll tell you, it actually, we were working on various titles to teach this, and we just ran it by AI, and AI came up with a few titles, and this was one of them. I'm like, wow. And AI can write articles better than I can write them now. There was an article that I tested the other day, and it was better than what I could have written. I'm a pretty good writer. So the world is changing, and a lot of jobs are at risk like never before. I'm predicting that that's about everything, even eventually a lot of legal jobs, financial jobs, everything will be solved by artificial intelligence. I think we're entering into an interesting world. So it's good to get on top of the game. So definitely take some kind of action.
Well, even with the medical field, like there's been different podcasts and all that even show studies that by around 2045 or so that even doctors are going to be replaced by robots, because that's going to have a lot more cures to things.
Yeah.
So it's interesting times we're heading into, and that's why I personally don't think anything is really safe myself, which is why, regardless of what your job or career is, investments is one thing that obviously it's not advice, but this is my own opinion, that investing is definitely one area that, regardless of what you want to do, that you want to get into and learn how to do, just because I don't think any career really is safe. There's obviously some out there that will be, but just with how smart robots are going to be, like how good they already are, we're literally in the really early stages of AI development. It's just going to be scary, almost scary what we're going to be facing.
I couldn't agree more.
That's why, regardless if it's with us or one of these programs that you learn how to do it, one way or the other, that you will have to take action. So that's really all I can encourage you to do from my own perspective, is some form take action, whatever that is to you, whether it's to get educated, whether it's to chat to anyone. But yeah. Any final words from you, Warren, before we continue?
Not in particular, no. Just what's the process for them to sign up for this, Ed?
So yeah, for those of you that do want to go ahead with this, there was a slide that was moved there for some reason, but I'll put the link in the chat. This is really where, this is the page you can go to. There's a option where you can choose to either go ahead with the monthly. The monthly says 12 payments, but what happens is that after 3 months, if you want to cancel it, just reach out to our team. All the details you'll need will be involved once you join, and then the team will cancel the payment. So there's 3 months, no obligation trial. After that, you can work out what you want to do from there, or you can choose the upfront. Or if you actually want to speak to someone beforehand, whether it's on this or you're more suitable to a tier 4 program or tier 5, then the other step 2 you can do is chat to one of our team members here on the inquire page, and which you can do by typing in globalwealthclub.com/inquire. And if you have any questions that, like, and you actually want to speak to someone before going ahead with anything, then this is a free no obligation call available to you for free, and that could be done there.
Awesome. Thank you, Edward.
So yeah, once again, guys, said it before, but thanks for your time. Hopefully you've taken value out of this in some form and have something to go away with. That was the aim, is to at least give you one thing to go away with, whatever that is, rather than overcomplicating it. Try doing one thing, and as Stephen says, and you'll pretty much be on your way. So that's it from me. Enjoy the rest of your night. and we'll speak soon.